exploring some of the critical issues facing Sri Lanka today. The interview.
Today we are speaking with Mr. J.C. Weliamuna, the Executive Director of Transparency International, Sri Lanka. Welcome to the show, Mr. Weliamuna.
Thank you.
I want to begin by putting you on the spot, as it were. Could you give me the numbers, the hotline numbers of the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery, or the Zero Corruption Bureau at the Legal Aid Commission, or in fact your own hotline that you set up in August last year? Do you know any of these numbers? and that is precisely the problem. I wanted to begin by putting you on the spot because frankly I didn't know these numbers either till I read up on them in preparation for this interview. And is that really the problem? We all know, we all have all experienced corruption. But is the problem that we don't know what to do about it and who to go with allegations of corruption?
But I think the problem is little larger than that.
Yeah.
The hotline number is quite a different thing. Of course, there are so many hotlines. But what is corruption?
Yes.
It's a basic issue is people do not understand, nor do they get an opportunity to understand the issues of corruption. Because corruption has been primarily spoken about during elections in Sri Lanka. They didn't go beyond that. And soon after one government is defeated, another government came in, they continue with the same thing, and they started using corruption as a tool to attack each other.
Now, corruption as that's quite right. I mean, corruption is only spoken about in terms of party politics. But do you feel that part of the problem therefore is that people aren't talking about it? I mean, people are talking about corruption, but not necessarily ways in which to combat it. That is
exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I mean, in a democracy, let's be frank, nobody will give anything unless you demand.
Right.
Who is to demand in a democracy? People. If the people are equipped with the demand and the substantive issues, I'm not saying that everybody should know A to Z of corruption. They of course understand the symptoms of corruption. Only thing they basically have fixed ideas of corruption. They know bribery as corruption, that's all. Corruption is more than bribery. Bribery is one form of corruption. Take, for example, nepotism, probably the worst form of corruption. A conflict of interest, another big issue in the country. Now, those things are not identified as questions of corruption.
Were the public to identify these as corruption? I mean, the hotline is a manifestation of, a legislative legal framework that would get these complaints and then do something about it. But in Sri Lanka, for instance, all efforts to get access to information, right to information legislation have failed, and the laws that are in place are sadly not, people are not being able to leverage them to help them combat this issue. What then? What then?
Well, it's like this actually. I mean, people do know basics of geography, basics of any other science or anything. So that is why they are having some awareness and they are raising the issues. Similarly, governance and anti-corruption field is not taken in as a field that they should learn. I'm not saying that everybody should learn. That is exactly the opposite. What I'm saying is that they feel, but they must be equipped with issues. Then they will raise it at any forum they like. Now, the question of taking up issues of corruption is one answer probably. But I think if people do know, they feel differently and they take up, there will be informed public to raise more and more wider issues. Then the governments and people in power will have to respond accordingly. Now what has happened is they may be able to hide anything and say that, okay, that's all we have. So I think freedom of right to information is one of them, but there are more wider things.
I'm sure, but you see, the problem is, I think, brought out by our Corruption Perceptions Index, yeah? And it's a worldwide survey of corruption in terms of perceptions. And if you look at Sri Lanka, since it was featured first in 2002, we were 52nd. In 2004, we had slipped to 67. In 2005, 78. In 2006, 84th. And in the last year, we had slipped 10 positions to 94. We are one of the, in terms of corruption, the perception of corruption, one of the highest in South Asia. And we seem to be in an inexorable, unstoppable, in terms of decline. I mean, if the public, as you say, are informed and they know what is going on, surely this should be able to show some improvement.
Yeah, now you are talking about the CPI, Corruption Perception Index. Actually, it should be read, not in terms of where we are placed, but in terms of the score, how much we got. Right. 2002, we have scored almost 4.5 out of 10. If you have scored about 6 or above, that means you are managing corruption, at least in the perception of those who are interviewed for that purpose. But at the moment, we are in 3.2. That is what is material, not the number of countries, because number of countries are day-to-day adding right. into that. And quite contrary to what is happening in Sri Lanka, India, there is an upward trend with the right to information.
So there is a direct correlation there then?
There is. And probably the issue is that there is an informed reaction by the public on corruption issues. And corruption, who understands corruption better? In my view, it is the general public. And it is the general public who can make revolutions and not the intellectuals, in my view. And it is they who ultimately respond to corruption, and because they suffer, and all others will basically...
Something you're saying doesn't quite gel. Are you saying that the general public in Sri Lanka, who are arguably suffering on account of corruption, on the one hand you're saying that they are the ones who know best, on the other hand I don't see any revolution on the street? What is the explanation for this?
No, what I'm saying is, of course, they understand the symptoms of corruption, but they must be well equipped with what should they do within a democratic space. Right. Otherwise, somebody can say, okay, take up arms, eliminate all corrupt people, and some people, and there is a myth that corruption can only be tackled by dictators, which is a myth all over. But those are the decisions that people come to unless they are well informed.
Now, in February 2008, you said you issued a rather strong statement on the sudden removal of the Director General of the Bribery Commission, and you said, quote, "This creates an irreversible bad precedent." You also said the move smacks of political interference, and I quote again, "The present course of action followed by the President's office does not build confidence either in the President, his government, or the Commission itself." If the mechanics, if the institutional frameworks combating corruption are themselves vitiated, undermined, what do you do then?
Well, you have to strengthen them. Now, what you referred to one of the instances, I mean, there are plenty of instances in the country. Now, anti-corruption body of the country has to be independent. Now, how do you make it independent? It has to be independent administratively as well as financially. Financial independence is not there for any of the institutions in the country. They are totally dependent. Administrative independence, which is guaranteed by the statutes, is also basically challenged when someone who doesn't have power to do that, President in this instance, is removing the Director General. Now that means clearly these institutions have been interfered with. We cannot get such institutions to tackle corruption to the maximum.
Right, but they are there.
They are there. But they are there, but they are not strong enough.
Right, and
but
so
they
what
are
do
not
you do?
Well, of course, there has to be again a public response. I mean, if you are expecting only response from one institution or one individual, it will never happen. But the point I am making is that there is no sufficient demand to protect these institutions.
Now I'm going to play